Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. To ensure that we have optimal audience attendance before we start off, we'll just be taking 2 minutes before we head off. So please have some patience with us. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on the webinar, Building Sustainable Maritime Careers from Education to Industry Impact. We're aware that the maritime industry itself has been undergoing transformative and exponential changes, right? Be it in terms of offshore energy, maritime law, blue ocean economy, and policy echoes the integration of AI and automation in the shipping sector, right? So we know that there have been sea changes in the maritime sector in the recent past. And because of that, we are very privileged that we'd be hosting two professionals today who represent both the commercial industry side as well as the policy development side of the maritime sector. And so we will have a very multifaceted conversation today, I'm sure. But let me just briefly introduce ourselves. We are MLA College. What we specialize in is offering distance learning programs in both the maritime as well as the sustainability domain. And we are distinguished by terms of our strategic partnerships that we have, specifically with the University of Plymouth, which still happens to be our awarding body for degree programs. And apart from that, we do have partnerships with the Institute for Chartered Shipbrokers, with BIMCO, with Nautical Institute, as well as UNITA, that is the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. Now, without further ado, let me just introduce our guests. Firstly, we're privileged to have Gertrude Ohene-Asienim with us. She is a chartered shipbroker, a maritime consultant, and an associate tutor with us with over 2 decades of experience across shipbroking, maritime law, and marine insurance. Currently, she also serves as an assessor for the offshore support industry and an assistant examiner for legal principles in shipping business for ICS London. So, Gertrude, welcome aboard. We're honored to have you with us.
Thank you so
I would,
much, Anja, for that beautiful introduction.
the pleasure is all ours. And I would also like to introduce our second panelist, Jeffrey Botchway. He is a maritime educator and a policy contributor with a background in ports and shipping administration and an LLM in maritime law from the University of Southampton. He has lectured on maritime law. He's led youth-based initiatives like the Time Project, which we'll delve into during our conversation as well. And he's contributed significantly to national maritime policy development. So, Jeffrey, welcome on board as well. We're glad to have you.
Thank you very much, Ajin.
So, without further ado, Gertrude, I'll turn the first question to you. Considering that you've had quite a diverse professional experience in the maritime sector, right? Be it in shipbroking, be it in offshore energy, be it in maritime consultancy, right? Based on your extensive experience, what do you feel are the most realistic entry points for young professionals who want to build long-term maritime careers, who are not just say worried about a specific contract, but actually want a career that scales at large?
Thank you so much for the question. As you rightly indicated, I've had the privilege of working in various sectors in the maritime sector, from working with FPSO companies, seismic operation companies, uh, subsea engineering, chartering of ships, and academia, as well as in the labor side and procurement in the shipping and offshore side, as well as working with a company that was into ship agency. So I've more or less gone across most of the maritime fields. That's the beauty about maritime. People see maritime as seafaring, but maritime spans across a lot of sectors, and they are all diverse and specialized areas. So we have careers that span across different areas from commercial to technical. So the entry area actually depends on whether you are moving into the commercial sector or you're moving into the technical role. But in most cases, the basic qualification you need is to have a higher degree of learning, whether be it a diploma from a university or a certificate course or a degree or a postgraduate degree. So basically, your basic degree qualifies you entry, but to be able to make any meaningful impact, you need to specialize. And it's a specialization that requires special skills. And the special skills will determine where you want to work. If you want to become a diver, you definitely need to have a certificate in diving. If you want to become a surveyor, you definitely need a certificate in surveying. If you want to be a shipbroker, you definitely need a certificate in shipbrokering from a recognized institute like the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers. Or if you want to get into freight forwarding, then you need to move into the FIATA courses, or if you want to be a logistician. So basically, where you want to be or which area you want to be placed would determine the minimum criteria that encourages you to enter and then progress through the ranks. So basically, it's a beautiful world full of married opportunities. And the beautiful thing about the maritime industry is that everybody can enter. So you can be a cook, have your 5 mandatories, and be able to go on board a vessel and work offshore or on container vessels or others. So it is a beautiful environment to be in with so many opportunities that are uncountable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Gertrude. It's indeed very insightful. What I infer from your statement is that firstly, one has to have a degree of surety, right? Whether they want to venture into the commercial side or into the technical side, right? That's a very
Yes.
fundamental demarcation that they must have in mind. But
Hmm.
say beyond that, even in terms of where they'd like to specialize in, they at least need a higher level degree to start off,
Yes.
and subsequently a certification that can account for their professional experience or vocational skill in that particular sector, right? That they'd like to specialize in.
Exactly, exactly. So aside having other things like negotiation skills, interpersonal skills, being a team player, having a good communication skills, and because you're going to work across, cutting across cultural backgrounds, you're going to work across, cutting across time zones, and so shipping we say is 24/7. So your ability to endure is also key. So these are fundamental basic principles that you need to get.
Ah, thank you so much for sharing that, Gertrude. It's incredibly insightful. And this is where I'd also like to engage with the audience, because say this is not specifically an interview, but it is more of a conversation, right? In which we'd
Yes,
also love to know what the audience thinks, what are their personal aspirations. So I do urge each and every participant to say share their opinions, to ask any questions that might arise during our conversation, and we'll be sure to engage with them so that it's not say just a unilateral interview post format, but it's more of a conversation with everyone involved. So that's what we hope for
exactly.
from today. Um, but turning to you, Jeffrey, I see that you have significant experience teaching maritime law and also mentoring students, right, who are trying to transition from, say, educational institutions like Regional Maritime University, right, where you yourself come from, and entering the industry itself. right? So, based on your exposure, based on your experience, where do you think these young professionals face barriers or struggles when they're trying to move into the industry itself?
Thanks, Arjun. So I would say this, I've had the chance to meet a lot of brilliant students who often struggle when they are transitioning into the industry. And I realized that the biggest struggle is not about the lack of intelligence or lack of technical knowledge, but it's more about the gap between academia or academic understanding and operational reality. Most students will graduate with theoretical foundations, strong theoretical foundations. They understand conventions, they understand engineering principles, they also understand legal frameworks. But when they enter the industry, then they start to struggle because they are often unprepared for how decisions are made within the maritime domain, especially when you are faced with time pressure or maybe commercial constraints. But then there are a few challenges I would like to highlight in regards to this. The first would be the expectation mismatch, in the sense that young professionals often, during their academic curriculum and everything, they often know what is expected of them. They know what to learn. They know what the structure looks like. But then that's not the same within industry. Within industry, you'd realize that you're expected to take initiative. You're expected to adapt. You ask, you observe. You are not always told what to do. The second bit is limited system thinking, in the sense that education tends to be done in silos. So maybe you learn law, you'd learn maybe administration, you learn engineering or whatever. But you'd realize that within the industry, a single operational issue would actually involve insurance, involve human factors, involve law, involve other aspects. So when you look at it that way, you realize that many young professionals would suffer because they've not taken the initiative to go beyond whatever they've learned. And the third and final thing I would like to mention with regards to this is confidence. Confidence in a professional environment. Um, Within the maritime domain, things are done according to order, and it's a global industry. So then as a young professional, what you need to also learn is how to be confident, speaking in meetings, communicating with people across different cultures, and also engaging senior leadership. Um, you shouldn't find that intimidating. And I mean, this is rarely taught in formal settings, but ideally, if you are able to practice this, you're able to learn this, it would actually influence your career progression. The transition becomes basically smoother when you are able to emphasize on knowledge, not just content. And also you are able to exercise judgment as well as professional behavior. Thank you.
That's extremely insightful, Jeffrey. I see that you broke it down into three key themes, right? One was
Yeah.
expectation mismatch. The second was
Yes.
limited system thinking. And the third was
Yes.
confidence in not just, say, their professional skill, but also in terms of presenting themselves, right? How they come across to senior leadership.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think it's very interesting that you pick up on that because what I was going to ask Gertrude was essentially about the sort of practical skills that people lack, when they're entering the shipping industry and what sort of skills are really required to accelerate career progression. So I feel you've given us great food for thought for my next question as well.
Exactly. I think Jeffrey has hit on the points. And so I would just like to add on to what he's already given. And it's the same from my perspective. We realize that people have great theoretical backgrounds, whether they are coming from a maritime university or wherever, but they lack practical experience. For instance, even if you are a seafarer and you've been trained to go through your cadetship training in a university, you need to go on board a vessel to be able to enhance that skill to qualify to do your officer's course. And getting that opportunity to get the practical experience is usually what is lacking. Another thing that is lacking now, we are in a world where the young people want everything fast, but there has to be great adaptability. How do you adapt to an industry that works 24/7 when you are used to probably going to school for a few hours and then you are done? So adaptability into the harsh environment, for instance, working on board a vessel, you have to work about 12 hours on an offshore vessel, for instance. And so that adaptability, most people find the environment harsh and they are not able to adapt. There's also working under pressure. For instance, a port agent in an operations department, there's a lot of pressure on you when there's a vessel in port because the ship can't wait. Any ship that is waiting is cost. And so you have to work round the clock to make sure that you achieve that. So that working under pressure is something that young people are usually not used to. So being freshly employed or in the system, they find that a bit too much for them to adapt at the same period. And then ability to demonstrate willingness to learn and be able to improve with changing infrastructure, technology, and other principles because things are changing very fast. As you mentioned in your introduction, we're moving towards sustainability, innovation, and advanced technology using AI and other things. So, how you can blend the theory by acquiring the skills on hands-on skills with your hands-on using technology is very key to be able to adapt into the shipping industry. So the young people are advised to um, be able to blend a transition from the theoretical knowledge into a practical environment where you are required to take initiatives at the spell of the moment because things are done fast and it needs to go with your proactiveness and assertiveness.
Thank you for sharing that insight, Gertrude. What I'm understanding is that it's not just say the theoretical knowledge or say the intellectual expertise acquired over the subject matter, but it's also the attitude itself, right, on the job. Like, is one
Exactly,
adaptable? Is one ready to work under pressure? Are they going to be proactive when there's a stressful situation, right? And that demands not
exactly.
just say a set process, but perhaps innovativeness on the spot, right?
Exactly, the principles. So you need to acquire these principles to make you marketable. Otherwise, you acquire the theory and you realize that you are not employable because at the employment side, we need you to take initiatives. As Jeffrey said, we need you to be proactive, we need you to be assertive, problem solving skills. So that is what you need to be able to survive in such an environment.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing the insights, Gertrude. Uh, we've had one question come in from Nathaniel Davis, which I feel is very relevant to our conversation right now. What they've specifically asked is that how does the college specifically address the gaps mentioned? What I would like is to add on to this question in general by asking how does investment in higher education, right? It could be any maritime domain. How does it
Mhm.
bridge these gaps which and a new entrant in the industry would have. Please, and I open the question to both of you.
I would love to address it using the MLA College as an example, where I have recently joined as an associate tutor. I've been very fascinated about how the college modules are designed to meet with current modern challenges. So you have sustainability in maritime operations, where the students are being taught the new innovations and things. And what I like most about the college is the fact that questions that are posed to students are very practical. And so, although you are learning the theory, you are supposed to apply that theory in a practical setting in the questions that you are being asked by the university. So this will give you a critical thinking because you are not just going to be able to do what we call in Ghana chew and pour. So you chew the theory and then you pour it on a paper because you are asked a straightforward question about what is the bill of lading. No, you're not going to get that. You're going to get a practical industry-based question where you are supposed to apply the theory as well as tease out the practicals and bring out solutions about how you're going to solve it. And that gives the students the critical thinking that they need. So immediately you finish such a course, obviously you are going to transition into industry with a practical understanding of the theory because maritime is based on principles and the principles must be applied practically. And so if you're able to blend that two, you are in a good position to be able to transition into industry without any hitches. And it makes you marketable because employers are looking for people who can apply what they know on with their hands on with the practical. So that approach, and then it's supposed to be mirrored by most universities, colleges, and others who are training maritime professionals, or other bodies who are training young people to come into industry. The hands-on practical knowledge is key, and the only way you can do that, apart from field trips and mentorships, bringing in guest lecturers and research and others, it is important that we also add the practical questions during examinations, so that the students have a hands-on on exactly what they are going to face when they come out. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And before I, continue, I would mention that I see that two people have raised their hands. Just a request that we don't have a format over here in which, we can give video access to the attendees. So if you can ask your relevant questions in the question box, we'll make sure that they're addressed. So I do urge you to ask your question over there. Uh, Jeffrey, based on, the very insightful share that Gertrude has done, I would like to make a specific sub question to this aspect for you, which is that how do you feel a background in maritime law or say policy advisory work? How do you think that opens one's career flexibility, across shipping, ports, regulatory bodies, and the sort?
Okay, thank you. Before I jump on to the maritime law question, which is specific to me, my background, I would want to say core maritime literacy is key. You understand, regardless of your role. Um, Regardless of wherever you find yourself in the maritime industry, you need to be able to understand how ships make money, how ports and logistics flow, how the shipping market operates, and other things. This separates you from someone who is just working within a profession and actually translates you to somebody who actually gives value to the maritime industry. For me, maritime law has actually served as a useful foundation for me, in the sense that it goes far beyond litigation or maybe legal practice. What I have realized is that it taught me how risk is allocated, how responsibility is defined, as well as how things operate within different jurisdictions. And I mean, these things are very important when you are shaping your mindset in an environment where you realize that any action can actually have consequences financially, environmentally, or operationally. I would say, apart from the fact that it's helped me to be able to interpret policy, interpret regulations, and actually be operationally ready, it's also helped with regards to seeing contracts and also regulations beyond paperwork, seeing them as operational tools that help to advance the maritime industry forward. I think having a basic understanding, or you don't necessarily have to do an LLM in maritime law, but just having an understanding of it actually helps you out. Let me just use an example. When you are operating in a shipping company as a charterer, you need to have a basic understanding of maritime law, chartering arrangements, risk allocation, and all these things. So I think it's actually been a useful um, platform for me to be able to leverage on to advance within the maritime industry.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much for sharing that,
yeah.
Jeffrey. And firstly, thank you for tackling the specific question about higher education as well. That I'm
Mm.
sure is very relevant for attendees who might be considering in investing one in order to expand their employment opportunities beyond, say, just sailing itself, right? So, and that is a question that we will get to subsequently as well. But Gertrude, just for your reference, we did have a webinar previously, and I know we've had, talked about this in a previous conversation as well, with the international chairperson for ICS, who was mentioning, say, the relevance of professional certifications, of qualifications to building credibility, mobility, and long-term industry positioning, right? Which is a crucial prerequisite to building a sustainable career. Is that something you'd like to comment on?
Certainly, certainly. And I can use myself as an example. I got my degree in geography and English and had no maritime background at all, until there was a company looking for people to employ as management trainees. And one of the criteria, once you are selected, was to write the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers exams. And so that was when I was first introduced to a professional qualification after my degree. And I found it very useful that once you get a professional qualification. Because if you look at the subject matter, for instance, where that ICS covers, as Jeffrey said, it cuts across commercial, legal, technical areas. And so the four compulsory subjects that you're even supposed to write has legal principles in shipping business. So from the very fundamentals of my career, it helped me a lot, and it makes you progress very fast in your career path because you become extremely knowledgeable and professional. Belonging to a professional body, one, you sign on to the code of conduct and ethics. So, for instance, in ICS, we say our word is our bond. So you know that when you are dealing with people who have the same initials, like a member of the institute or a fellow of the institute, you know that you are dealing with people who apply ethics, compliance, and they belong to a professional body that brings in at that. In addition to that, questions are so practical, so it gives you that practical knowledge as well, and it helps you to transition really fast. Aside the fact that the certifications are also global, and so shipping is also global. So transition from one country to another does not matter because you have an international certificate that cuts across regions or your own country. And the global network that it gives you to be able to reach out. So currently I can reach out to people all over the world because of my professional association for networking, and it promotes industry best practices as well because there's continuous learning once you belong to a professional body. So there are webinars, there are other newsletters and other things that are published that gives you continuous learning. And so you are able to apply changes that are coming in the industry. You're able to apply and get to know about these, and because the world evolves every time. Conventions are amended all the time. Principles are amended. So you need to be current, and that's what an industry uh, uh, profession does to you. So it is important that when you are in shipping, whether you are in the shipbrokering side, whether you are in the nautical side, whether you are in the logistics side, or whichever side you find yourself, you align yourself with a professional body that will help you grow as you go along, and then also connect worldwide so that you can learn other principles and best practices from other countries. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Gertrude. I think your anecdotal experience of, initially being in a very non-cognate domain and eventually transiting to the maritime sector, through the examinations that you went through is very revealing. That perhaps it's never too late to start a career. And I'm sure it might serve as,
Not at
say, a
all.
beacon of inspiration for, audience members as well who might be apprehensive that they're a bit late, to enter into the sector itself. So thank you for sharing that anecdote.
Thank you.
And a related point that you mentioned was in terms of, say, career acceleration, global mobility, right? Acquiring and integrating industry best practices. I think it seems to
Mhm.
be very relevant for people who want to, say, not stagnate at a particular place too long, but want to get to the next step, right? And want to know the best way of going forward.
Exactly, and because it's a wide range of subjects you study, you're able to transition from one role to another quite easily. Because if you do ship management, you do port agency, you do port and terminal management. It means you can work in a port, you can work in port agency, you can work in a ship management company, or you can work if you do the offshore support industry course. For instance, you could work in the offshore sector. So, or marine insurance. The courses are designed in such a way that it gives you a wide range of opportunities, and that then you can then narrow it down to where your interest is and specialize in that to make you an authority. There's one thing about specialization, it makes you an authority, and in a shipping industry you need that authority to be able to stamp your authority into something that this is my specialization and your authority in it. So it helps you to build up on your university qualification, gives you an authority in a particular side.
Uh, That's extremely telling, Gertrude, that perhaps when one has the problem of plenty, right, that based on their qualification, they have the ability to choose across sectors, across industries, that's when they really know where their interest is and where they like to grow, right, rather than having it dictated for them that this is your line and this is where you stick to for the rest of your career.
Exactly.
So Jeffrey, turning to you, uh, I see that you've had incredible work experience in terms of bridging youth and stakeholders in Ghana and UK to the maritime sector, right? Like, for example, your initiatives like Teens in Maritime Education seem to be fundamentally linked towards early exposure to maritime career, right? The sort of array of opportunities that might be available. So I think contrasting to, say, of course, Gertrude's motto of being able to enter the career even later based on the right exposure, what is it that pushes you towards early exposure for teens?
Um, I think Gertrude laid the foundation for this and highlighted the fact that others can enter the industry by chance. Um, in Ghana, where we have coastal regions and others who are not having that proximity advantage, you realize that people end up getting to the industry because of that proximity advantage. They have people who are working as seamen, seafarers, or maybe close to a maritime related activity. Um, I started this campaign not only to create a talent pipeline, but also because I realized that exposure at an early age really matters because that's where the career imagination forms. People, through engagement, I realized that some of these young people make decisions based on who the richest person in their family is or who the richest person in their neighborhood is. So if the richest person is a doctor, it means that they are looking at being a doctor. If the richest person is a farmer, they are going to be a farmer. If we are lucky and the richest person is a seafarer, then obviously they are going to look at that direction. Then the other aspect has got to do with they also take cue from not just the richest, but also those who have been impactful in their life, in their lives. So what does my favorite auntie do? What does my favorite uncle do? These things really matter. So by the time they reach secondary school, they've already ruled out a lot of these sectors. You understand? They've ruled out entire sectors, including the maritime domain. It's not because they lack interest, but it's because they lack information. The maritime industry, like I would say, is a very big industry. Any job can fit in, but then it
Mm,
suffers an awareness gap.
mm,
So people wouldn't aspire to be what they don't know. And that's where the problem is. So by these interactions, by engaging them, by teaching them about the maritime industry, sometimes when you get the feedback from surveys that have been had, you'd really smile because you'd realize that there are people who were thinking about finance, but they didn't know that there was space for them within the maritime domain as ship financiers. They didn't know
mm,
that there was aspects where they could actually maybe put in their insurance within the maritime domain, or maybe even act as medical personnel within the maritime domain. So just by letting them understand that the industry is not static, it's dynamic, and there's space for everyone actually makes them able to recognize pathways that they didn't even know existed. So with initiatives like the Time Project, I have been happy because I've seen the impact. I've seen how people shift from asking questions like, is maritime only about ships, to moving to questions like, how does my skill fit into the maritime domain? I mean, when you look at it from early exposure perspective, you realize that it improves diversity in the talent pipeline. It's not just by maybe getting maybe a particular um, trend, maybe let's say employing people within a particular sector, but other people who get exposed will now start thinking, how do my skills fit into the industry? Then it also reduces that um, concept of skills mismatch, which I mentioned earlier, because then there's an active interest in looking at what the industry was name is about, and also preparing themselves to be industry ready. And I mean, there is this confidence when you are operating in a domain you love and you know about. So exposure at a very early age actually takes out that issue of maybe that's not being sure whether you can really operate within this domain. You understand, it builds that confidence because there's an intentional career planning. You know what to do, you know the next steps, and you know how to fit into it. Thank you.
mm.
Gertrude, would you like to comment on this as well? I feel you have something to say.
Yeah, yes, yes. So, just like Jeffrey and I shared, I learned about the maritime career very late in my life because I wasn't close to a coastal town like Jeffrey was exposed to. He was in the capital quite early. So, in a small village where I come from, there was nothing about maritime. So, as you said, what you look up to some auntie or uncle who's in a particular profession. So, I wanted to be a newscaster. I thought they dress well and they look very fine when they're on TV. But when I got to know about the maritime industry after my university career, I thought it was a big gap that is being left without people being introduced to maritime courses. In Ghana, we are not introduced to maritime courses in our high schools. So you only want to do maritime, and most universities don't do anything maritime. So it's either you go to a maritime university, which we have. Luckily, we have one, but I never knew about it until I had finished my first degree. So that's a missed opportunity. I was recently in Spain and realized that young people as young as 12 years are introduced to, for instance, yachting classes. So that introduced them early into the maritime industry to be able to have a formative thinking about what they want to do, because there are so many opportunities in the area, and it's so. I always say that people in maritime are selfish. They want to keep the money to themselves, so they don't want to talk about the industry they are in for other people to know. But it is important that we educate people in second cycle institutions and those who are pursuing their secondary school qualifications, introduce them to early maritime careers and let them see how diverse these industries are and the opportunities that they have, that it can accommodate people from project management to environmentalists to engineers to every background that you have. It's a matter of getting in there and also adding the technical qualification that you need to be able to grow. So it's important that we get to talk about, and so we commend MLA College for this initiative and webinar, which is targeted at getting the young people to be able to understand the opportunities that are available to them. So we need more of such initiatives in the industry to introduce people to these careers and opportunities.
Thank you for sharing that, Gertrude. Before I continue, I would like to say I think I can see you being a very successful newscaster as well. So maybe that's a missed
Yeah.
opportunity. Just see.
Yeah, I wanted to just add to that that it's never too late. For those who also want to be newscasters, it's never too late. Maritime journalism and maritime media is a big
Yes.
space that is underexplored. So then if people can also look into it, I mean, that would be great. I mean, it also helps with that awareness gap, filling in that awareness gap as well.
And I think I wasn't too late at all because I taught Jeffrey at the university. So
Yes, she
I got
did.
in
Yes,
early enough for him
Oh,
to
wow.
be my student.
yes, yes, she did.
That's fascinating. I think it's come full circle then, because I'm sure you wouldn't have imagined that you'd be co-panelists on the same topic, right?
Exactly, exactly,
Exactly,
Wow.
exactly.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
And
yeah,
currently colleagues also at the MLA college.
yeah.
So it's very fascinating to see that what education can do, what upgrading your skills can do, what getting to know about an industry can do. So and you can imagine how many people over my I don't know how many years of I think about 15 years of teaching now, how many students you have trained and passed through your hands who are doing great in their various fields of endeavors. So it is very fulfilling and insightful to know that it's not too late to get in, but we should make a little bit more noise about it whilst people are young, so that it becomes the first choice um, career opportunity than and later getting to know before they get in.
Yeah. And just to add to this, Gertrude has been a great lecturer. I mean, she set the foundation for me to actually go and do maritime law. She taught it so beautifully for me to understand and appreciate it. So then let us not also underestimate the impact of events such as this. You understand? Because by that exposure, people get interested and go ahead to do great things within the maritime space.
Oh,
That's
thank you for
truly a
that.
fascinating insight. Of course.
He didn't tell me that.
Now you know.
Maybe he was waiting for the best possible platform, and here it is, right? So
Yes.
there we go. But Jeffrey, I think what you brought up about, right? Like, for example, I relate to what you said because back home in India as well, right? A lot of what people strive for is often linked to the person who seems to be doing the best, right? Or the person who's personally the most impactful for them. So there always
Mhm.
seems to be like these golden careers, which will always have,
Mhm.
say, good income, good cash flow, etc. And maybe
Yeah.
because of information asymmetry, right? Or opaqueness of information, people might not be best aware of other opportunities that are available. So I think these webinars, the initiatives you specifically do for youth exposure, I think they can play a very key role in ensuring that at least people have the best possible idea before they make a huge decision, like what career they would
Yeah.
like to be invested in.
Yeah.
So building onto this, I think now moving on more into a futuristic aspect, Gertrude, I see that you had experience both in offshore support and blue economy sectors, right? So what I would like to ask you is, where do you see emerging opportunities in the maritime space?
The maritime industry is moving more towards into sustainability and innovation and technology. For instance, even currently you have offshore companies transitioning into renewable energy. So opportunities in wind farm, in carbon capture, and many other. I mean, everybody's going green shipping. So net zero initiatives. So any opportunity in sustainability is key in the maritime sector, and technology is being deployed. If you were a shipbroker and you were using a calculator to do your lay time calculation, now you need a software to be able to do that calculation for you without you necessarily doing it manually. So everything is moving into the technological space. The protection of the environment, compliance and ethics is one key thing also in shipping. That even if you're an accountant, why don't you scale up to do courses in compliance and ethics so that you can apply that in your company? So we are moving more towards innovation, sustainability, and how to apply technological advancement in doing things. For instance, applying technology to track and trace cargo, even within terminals and on the ship and everywhere. So, how cyber security is also key. Um, Areas in cybersecurity, data protection, maritime sports, and tourism. Many opportunities exist in these areas. So it is up to up and coming young ones to see where they want to get into, specialize, and be able to take up some of these opportunities and grow their career. So that is why Jeffrey said that the maritime space accommodates almost everybody. So whether you are into computing, whether you're into environmental science, whether into tourism, you can specialize in the maritime sector as well and grow in our environment, like in the developing countries, for instance, things that we haven't looked at. For instance, includes maritime tourism. We have limited maritime tourism. We have limited maritime sports, and these are areas that we can look up to and also scale up in the sustainability and innovation sectors. So there are great opportunities to look up to, and then I'm sure that Jeffrey might be able to add up to this as well from his initiatives from where he sits.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I mean, what I would say is the maritime industry has had always been a traditional industry, but now it's been rapidly transformed by technology. I mean, there is a bit of resistance, but then definitely it's going to actually happen, and it is happening. Let's just say it that way. What I
Mm,
have realized is that young people who actually combine maritime knowledge with technology always have an upper advantage than their peers.
mm,
You don't necessarily need to learn how to code, but you need to learn how
mm,
it actually operates, or how softwares operate, or how the flow would actually be. Um, you could also maybe engage by reading more through industry insights, attending webinars like these, and also probably signing on some short courses. For instance, I actually decided to learn about 5 different languages somewhere, I think 2 years ago, because of a project I was working on. Not because I wanted to learn how to code, but because I wanted to be able to appreciate what the professionals were doing and engage. So then that also helps. But while technology really matters, while technical skills also matter, one thing we cannot also deny is the fact that you need to have human skills. These are often ignored. I mean, you need to know how to communicate across cultures. You need to be able to have good stakeholder management. You need to be able to be better at ethical decision making and the rest. I mean, technology will not replace these skills, but
mm,
those without these skills would actually lose out.
mm,
Those without these skills would actually lose out. So then
mhm.
I would say, no matter where you stand, if you can look at how technology affects where you operate and get to understand how that would actually influence and impact your work, I think you'll be at a greater advantage.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you. I think it's an interesting conglomeration of both, say, the technical developments as well as the human skills, which seems to stand out as a prerequisite for emerging trends, right? Because Gertrude was very vocal about emphasizing, say, the role of sustainability, of innovation, of technology, of emerging industry sectors like maritime sports, maritime tourism, etc. Right? But I found it very interesting that Jeffrey was still able to steer in the human element as well. That unless
Mm-hmm.
say one does focus on their soft skills, their cross-cultural context, and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps the technical skills themselves might not compensate for that, right? So it's maybe more of
Yeah.
an integrated way forward.
Yeah. You can always be trained for skills, but you cannot be trained for attitude if you don't want to change it. So just like Jeffrey said, it's very key in what we do because technology can do a lot of things, but you need a human factor to be able to control it. So you need to work on your attitude and your soft skills to be able to um, stand out from the rest. That you have to go the extra mile to be able to stand out from the rest because everybody can have the same qualification. It's about how you improve upon yourself that will make you stand out from the rest so that you can reach an appreciable level with a very short possible time.
Thank you for sharing that, Gertrude. Um, Interestingly, because I've just had a question come in as well from Captain Norman Lopez, who's saying that, his question is generally aimed at, say, seafarers who may not be able to, say, start with the degree level qualification yet, but they still want to transit onshore. They don't want to be merely restricted to sea going after a while. They say not so young, in his own words. I'm not quoting here, and he's saying that but they still want to transit on shore. I think this broadly links to the question I wanted to ask you, Jeffrey, that you've had significant educational exposure, policy exposure, right? So of course your experience shows you that seagoing roles is not the end all and be all of the maritime sector. How does one go about broadening that horizon for themselves, and how does one convert that into actionable steps?
I would start by saying this. Nobody invests where there's no profit. And I mean, when you look at profits, profit also includes a human capital. If I'm actually investing in a capital intensive organization that needs technical skills and everything, I would rather prefer somebody who goes beyond their theoretical background or theoretical framework to somebody who has lived that practical experience. And that is where seafarers come in. So
Mm,
most at times, it's not just about having the degree, you understand, but it's even about having the practical experience to be able to understand and appreciate where things are heading towards. And I mean, we are having conversation regarding technology. We are having technology regarding mass and the rest. You'd rather prefer to engage somebody who has lived life at sea to share their experience than somebody who has just read from books. So there's always that space for the maritime industry. And I mean, there are different entry points. While there are routes you can go through by using a degree, there are also other forms like apprenticeships, there are trainee programs, there are other things like internships and mentorship programs and everything. So there is no limitation when you want to come within the maritime domain. Like I said, it's about understanding the industry, knowing how you can actually create value wherever you are within the industry, and also positioning yourself by actually filling in any awareness gap that needs to be filled. You don't just enter the industry and feel like things will go on smoothly for you without necessarily understanding where you're operating and how you can also impact.
I want to
That's
say
a
hello to Captain
Sorry, please.
Norman Lopez. Um, and I always say that it's the same. I mean, seafarers become the best shipbrokers or maritime consultants if they transition by upgrading their skills with qualifications, for instance, from the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers and other professional bodies, because they know everything about the ship. They've been on the trade routes, they've been on the oceans, the continent, and so they can share best practices. I mean, that are heartwarming for you, and so there's opportunity for them transitioning from on board to onshore where the jobs, and they become good maritime consultants, surveyors, and others in these areas when they come offshore. So it will be good that whilst they go to sea, they enroll in courses like the MLA courses, as well as their professional courses with ICS and other professional bodies, so that they can easily transition between roles.
Thank you for sharing that, Gertrude. I think what you've mentioned is also something I've come across very frequently when talking to seafarers who want to transit onshore in more of, say, the corporate roles, right, or the strategy roles in these industries, in these companies, right? Because I've also sensed a sense of dismay, sometimes arising in which they feel that perhaps nobody in the leadership seems to have sailed on sea. So sometimes they feel there is a sense of disconnect. So maybe,
Mhm.
you know, seafarers transiting into these roles, transiting into the strategy and corporate end of these industries as well, might be a connection between perhaps policy and execution on ground. And just one more thing I'd like to ask you specifically, Gertrude, is that, you know, considering that you do have, say, experience in maritime law, in marine insurance, in international
Mm,
commercial law,
mm,
perhaps not everyone wants to become a lawyer specifically in the marine domain, right? But do you
mhm.
still feel that these legal and risk awareness in general is important for maritime professionals? And if so, how?
It is extremely important because everything in maritime is based on maritime legal principles and conventions. And if you're a trader and you don't understand your Incoterms, you'll be cheated. If you understand your Incoterms, you can apply them commercially to what you do. If you're a tally clerk and you are counting, you are not just counting, it's about somebody's liability. So if you miscount, it means somebody is losing out. In the same way, if you are a release person in a commercial setting releasing cargo without knowing about the document you're using to release cargo, you are going to incur liability for your company or for yourself. So it is important that we learn about the legal principles in shipping. It should be integrated in every course because the fundamental principles of shipping are based on legal rules. And these rules are mostly international conventions that cut across nations. So they are international regulations that need to be applied. And once you understand the fundamental principles as risk allocation, risk mitigation, and you are able to navigate through your work and get a much higher responsibility because you become an all-rounder, and you are able to also pinpoint the flaws in different departments and operations and ways to mitigate. So you can be able to draw your risk metrics and be able to bring out mitigation measures. So understanding the basic principle, because most maritime things are also contractual, whether it's a carriage of goods, whether it's putting your goods in a terminal, whether it's a sales contract. Most of them are all contractual. And so without understanding the basic legal principles, there will be a gap in your operation. So you need to close that gap by having a minimum. And that is why with ICS, our legal principles in shipping business course is compulsory, because we want you to understand the basic legal principles that govern your operations, whether you are in offshore, port and terminal, whichever area that you find yourself, so that you can be able to apply it to your work and be able to minimize your risk and liabilities that you incur in the industry. So it is extremely important that people get to have a basic understanding of their legal obligations, and then fundamental principles about what you are doing. It's about the principles about what you are doing and how you can apply that principles to be able to minimize your exposure to risk and harm to your company.
Thanks for sharing that, Gertrude, because I'm sure it
Mhm.
will not be immediately obvious to a new joiner that, say, a basic functional knowledge of law and principles, right, is extremely helpful, not just say for the individual, but also for the enterprise that they're a part of, right? In terms of risk
Yes.
minimization, adherence to compliance, things like that, right?
Mhm.
So I
Exactly.
think it's a relatively subtle aspect that you've touched upon, and perhaps something not touted frequently.
Exactly, it's not touted frequently at all, and you realize that people in my operation in the industry, people with limited maritime backgrounds, for instance, you can see that they've been trained on the job. They've been, for instance, releasing cargo. You ask them the basic principles behind demurrage, and they will not be able to tell you that. And that is a key gap that needs to be filled, because you need to understand the fundamentals of what you're doing, and so be able to apply them without, so that you can also ask the right questions. You see, it helps you to ask the right questions and be able to notice gaps much easier.
Extremely insightful, Gertrude. Thank you so much. Two aspects you've talked about, Jeffrey, so far has been, you mentioned that maritime industry has been traditionally conservative, right? Traditionally resistant to change. And you've also mentioned, say, that people, especially in developing societies, look up to impactful people in their personal lives, right? I feel that my next question kind of touches on these key themes. Often it seems that your youth oriented initiatives are essentially aimed towards developing solution oriented leaders, right, in a traditional maritime industry. What mindset shift do you feel these young professionals needs to be impactful in this sector, to make changes in the sector?
The the most important mindset shift is moving from seeking permission to taking responsibility. Like I mentioned earlier, initiative matters. The maritime industry would always respect competence, reliability, and judgment. And I mean, though it may seem conservative, it's actually practical. As a young professional, you should actually stop waiting for perfect clarity. Take initiatives. Be willing to learn on the job. You need to also respect tradition without being constrained by it. Um, you can also build credibility through consistency. I mean, small progress, small experience, small exposure, steady learning will compound over time, and that's what will actually make you succeed. You don't always need to be the loudest to succeed, but I mean, if you are actually showing signs of being dependable, being curious about the industry, solving problems, and also being prepared, that actually would position you to actually be able to advance within the industry.
Extremely fascinating, Jeffrey. I think fundamentally you've talked about taking initiatives, focusing on building credibility through consistency, right? Small
Yeah,
incremental steps which compound towards exponential outcomes over a period of time, right?
yeah,
That's essentially the core gist.
exactly.
All right. Gertrude, would you like to comment on this as well with regards to, say, young professionals needing rather a mindset shift?
Exactly. So, as we said, the industry is quite demanding. So it requires that there's a fine tuning of your mindset once you're getting into shipping. That is not a leisure job. You can't be in a technical role on operations or commercial role and be operating at leisure. I mean, we have meetings sometimes for people joining all over the world. Somebody must have to sacrifice their sleep to be able to make up for that meeting. So these are things that come your way that you need to adapt to. And so if you want the flexibility of, for instance, always working from home when you are somebody who needs to be in port or port agency, you obviously have to go on ships and be able to attend to the needs of the ship. So it comes with that. You need to be able to train your mind to adapt to the environment in which you're going to work for you to succeed. And it is important that once you get a feel of the different sectors and the roles, it also opens you up to be able to then specialize. To understand the other areas helps you to then know where to focus and specialize. But that comes with starting from somewhere and then moving on gradually. So it is important that people who are young who adapt their minds to the industry. There was a survey that we did and realized that young people are leaving roles like port agency because they don't want to go on board ships, they don't want to work at all times, they don't want to um, do most of the harsh things that come with shipping. But it is the terrain. That is why jobs also that come in harsh environments with strict conditions also come with a good pay and a good exposure. In shipping, once you are dealing in shipping, you are already a global person, you see. So you are dealing with ship owners, charterers, all over the world. So that makes you a unique. You can be in another role and be skewed to what you're doing in your corner, but shipping is such that the exposure is wide. So why not take the opportunity? Why not adapt and be able to make full use of your potential in such an environment?
Thank you so much for sharing that, both Jeffrey and Gertrude. We started this conversation with trying to understand that are there any gaps between, say, freshly coming out of an educational sector and trying to enter into the industry, right? And fundamentally, how do you stay abreast with changes? How do you say accelerate your career, right? What mindset shifts you require to ensure that
Hmm.
you're keeping at par with industry trends in general, right? So this is a question I would like to ask the both of you, that do you believe academic institutions and industry practitioners can collaborate more effectively to ensure that young professionals are more ready for real world maritime careers?
It is a key thing to do. Um, the shipping industry is changing, and academia needs to move up with the changing environments. So that begins with, for instance, shaping the curriculum that we use, for instance, to tailor made, more moving towards where the industry is going. So, like MLA College does, you have a lot of courses in sustainability, a lot of courses on integrating technology, innovation, environmental, in it's very key to move towards that. It's also key to give exposure. So how you do the blend of having industry people as associate tutors, for instance, because when an industry person is teaching you, the kind of experiences they can share, it brings to bear on the theory. I mean, one of my best experiences was to go to a P&I club when I was doing my LLM in maritime law, to go to a P&I club to experience, to have somebody who was a general average adjuster teaching me general average. It felt so good. The experiences, the case studies that you have, you cannot get from a person who is all in all theoretical. Okay, so those exposures, field trips are key. So industry should be opened up to accommodate field trips from academia, and also having a good research base where topics are provided and funded by industry to link, to give to academia to work on these research topics and be able to give them back so that it can be implemented in the. So there has to be, if you like, if for want of a better word, a marriage or inter collaboration between industry and academia to be able to bring out the best, and then also be able to give these students opportunities for internships and mentorships. It really helps. So just like having people to speak to them about the future prospects of what the courses they're doing, what they should expect when they get into industry, how they can easily integrate and get together. These things, when we put them in place, I think we will move forward as an industry. Thank you, Jeffrey. So
Thank,
you can.
thank you, Gertrude. Jeffrey, please come in.
Okay. Yeah, I think when industry and academia collaborate meaningfully, students don't just graduate with degrees, but with professional readiness. I mean, Gertrude laid the foundation by saying that MLA is actually industry led, so you learn more from industry. I mean, you also get industry actually making inputs in curriculum development. There are also that aspect of learning through structured approaches, reflection on professional ethics, and also the industry as a whole. And I think the way the MLA College program is designed actually exposes you to the technical understanding of the industry. So you come out readily and prepared. I mean, this is something that is critical within the industry. You don't come out with just technical competency, but you develop a professional identity, which is really relevant. I'm stressing on that because some people work within the maritime industry for years and they still do not have a professional identity. And I mean, Gertrude highlighted that by stating the fact that when you're actually specializing within a domain, you actually come out as an expert. So that's a critical factor in long-term success within the industry. And I think with the way things are structured at MLA, I think that's also what makes it very easy for people to build a professional identity before they come out. And I cannot overemphasize that.
It's very key.
Thank you so much for sharing this, both of you. It's been a very interesting conversation, at least for me. I cannot speak on behalf of attendees, but judging by say the number of questions we've received, the engagement we receive, I do feel it's been incredibly valuable, for the attendees as well. So I'd really like to thank the both of you for giving us your time and your expertise in the conversation today.
You're most welcome.
You're
It's
most
been
welcome.
a privilege to be on the panel and the call, and we are grateful to the attendees for their attendance, and we encourage them to enroll in the maritime profession, enroll with the MLA college, and also enroll with the professional bodies like ICS, so that they can improve and the opportunities abound for everybody. It's a big cake. You just have to take a bite and see how sweet and tasty it is, and then sail in the right direction so that you don't sink. That's all.
Mm. Yeah, then I would also add that this is not going to be the last webinar, so people should look out for webinars from MLA College. I mean, this is also one step in also educating yourself and knowing more about the industry. Don't always feel ready. The maritime industry would actually reward those who enter early and learn very fast. So then that's something you need to also be aware of. You need to be intentional about networking. It shouldn't be just about what you're going to benefit from people, but also learning from them, asking questions, whatever you don't understand, what you're curious about. Just make sure you are able to actively align yourselves with people within the industry so you can think long term rather than short term. You need to build industry understanding alongside your degree. And I would always say that it's not just about the degree. The skills really matter. Knowledge with no context is actually something that would limit you. So um, with that regard, I want to thank everyone for making time to just listen to us, and hopefully we'll be back here shortly to speak to you more.
So just on, the metaphor Gertrude mentioned of a cake, which is extremely tasty and ready to eat. We do
Yeah,
have three intakes in a year, right? And our
yeah.
upcoming intake is in May. So, our applications are open. It's ripe for the taking. I've just included my email in the chat section as well. So if anyone has any queries, I know we could not address a lot of the questions because there were a huge multitude which we could not fit in, but we would be happy to get back to you. So please do reach out to me. I'd be sure that they go to the right resource that we're able to get back to you. And also, considering that, if you would have any specific query for Jeffrey or Gertrude as well, I'd be glad to take them on, your behalf and get back to you shortly as well. So thank you everyone for giving us your time today, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you all.
Thank you.